checking that periodically. So please put any questions you have there. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will be helpful. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah. We have about an hour, and here was my thinking. My thinking was as follows. In order to do distance learning for preschool, there are definitely challenges and also opportunities. So what I would like you to do in the chat right now is to write something that you think will be challenging for you, or you already know will be challenging for distance learning in preschools, and or an advantage of something that is beneficial for distance learning for preschoolers. So you can do that right now. I'm going to give you about a minute or two to do that. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute to just have a regular conversation to a certain extent with you. Here was my plan. My plan was to talk a little bit about distance learning, and then there are a couple options. One option is to only focus on how you do distance learning in a live Zoom, like what are good ideas, programs, strategies in the live sessions that you might have with students. And we can talk about that the entire time. Or we can do that and activities and things that that your students can do when you're not live for the rest of the time that they're home. So we're going to do this by a show of hands as well. How many people here would like to just focus on what to do with distance learning in preschool in your live time with them? Raise your hand. That would be all we cover. Okay. How many people would like to do that, and which means we'll do less of that than we would if we did it? So live and also not live ideas to do with preschool. Show of hands. There are a bunch of people who haven't raised any hands, and that leads me to believe that I will, okay, I will do both of those things. If you do have a question that you don't want to put in chat, or you think it's good for everybody to hear your question, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question. I apologize. In the beginning, I usually like to go through who everybody is and what you all do. I feel that we are incredibly pressed for time in a way that I think will be more beneficial for me to just kind of go on. But please stop me if you have questions or you think I'm moving too fast. I'm happy for people to ask questions, and I think that's also beneficial. Any questions before I start? Okay, great. So again, just a reminder, please mute yourself if you are not already muted, and unmute yourself if you have a question. I will go back to sharing my screen. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Shared screen. Okay. I'm going to share my screen not in presentation mode because it will be easier for us to kind of for me to be less distracted and see your faces more. If that's a problem and you want to see bigger, then great. I hope that you read other people's challenges. Luckily, they're all challenges that I am familiar with and are the normal challenges of distance learning. One of the things that I think is the silver lining of all of this scenario is I think up till now, people kept saying, oh, you know, learning online, that's going to take over live school. I think everyone has been fairly convinced that this is not an ideal scenario. And in fact, live school is incredibly effective. So that being said, let's talk about what we have right now. Some of your challenges have been, from your comments, have been getting everyone to focus, pay attention, to participate, but also how many devices people have and how they can balance all of those things. And the benefits of distance learning is you might be more connected to parents than you would have been. Sometimes multiple people are involved in class, things like that. You can kind of teach kids a little bit differently when they're at home. Participation is a huge part, and getting people's attention is a huge part of the challenge. So the first thing we're going to look at is, first of all, to set expectations. That's both true in terms of in a live session and also in general. So one of the things that is beneficial is to start off every week sending your parents a schedule that just even touches on, or like lots of preschool classes do normally at the end of the week, here's what we did this week. So I think in this particular scenario, it's usually better to send it in the beginning of the week. Here's what we're hoping to get this week. And here are the times we're supposed to be meeting. And one of the things that's very helpful is to have a chart with like choices for activities for kids can do. And we'll get to that when we talk about what's called asynchronous learning, not when you're learning all together, but when you're offline. So setting expectations also applies to explaining to your students how it's going to work when it's a live feed. Is everyone muted? What if they have something to say? How do you mute and unmute? Should they just raise their hand and then you can control that? You want them to participate. What are the normal behaviors that you want them to have? Coming in pajamas? Probably not. You know, the idea that they should be doing this someplace that's quiet, that 50 other children are not running around them, if that's possible. And explaining to kids and talking to the kids about, okay, here's what this, you know, the next half hour is going to look like, is very, very helpful to start off. Interactivity is almost the key to making a Zoom session, which is ironic because this is not going to be so interactive. But interactivity is the key to making a Zoom class, particularly with preschool and elementary school age students, the most beneficial. Interactivity does not need to mean everyone has to talk. And there are about 4 billion ideas of what interactivity can be. And before I give you my ideas, does anyone have any suggestions of interactivity? Yeah, Michelle.
So you can provide the parents with something similar that you have, like a bingo board. Mm-hmm. You would have the same, and so you could play a game interactively.
Great. Yes, that's amazing. Randy, you said a scavenger hunt, also a good one. Also, I mean, Paige, was your hand up?
So today we started talking about clouds today and different kinds of clouds. So we had pictures of clouds, and written on each cloud was a move. We've been doing this, trying to do a movement activity each day. So their movement was float like a cloud, roll like a cloud. What is a rainy day cloud? So all they had to do was get off their chairs and move and be interactive, and we were still on mute the whole time.
Great. Right, so experiments and art activities are also good, especially if you can give the parents a heads up of the supplies that they need, also interactive. And that gives a great opportunity. I just realized I forgot one thing about set expectations. if you normally in your classroom have like a classroom meeting where you go over what the weather is, what today is, or maybe you do some kind of tefillah of prayer or something like that, you can still do that and just assign a child, like give them a heads up the day before. You're going to be the person who tells us about the weather. The next kid, you're going to be the one who tells us about, but that routine that they're used to, you can still do that. It should be probably abbreviated, not as long, but still those things that are familiar, that routine that's familiar is very, very helpful. Sorry, I lagged because of, a little bit all over the place for me right now. Some other things that teachers can do are also use things that are around the house ahead of time and ask students to either gather them ahead of time or even say, let's say you're learning about colors. Okay, everyone has 1 minute to go find something blue and bring it back here and show it on your screen. And then everyone can go and find something blue and bring it back and show it on their screen. If you are afraid that when they go, they will leave and never come back, then before class, send the note to their parents or in the, here's what's happening this week, and give them a heads up that they should have something blue on hand for their child so that if they go off and running, you don't just lose them completely. Susan, was that your question? Oh, you have to unmute. Yeah.
We were learning about what is a kibbutz and what could you do on one. And we had the children come dressed, and we came dressed as the job we would want to have on it. Mm-hmm. So it was exciting for them to see what they were all wearing before they could even tell us. It was like a little sneak peek. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. Yes. And that's another idea I was going to talk about, is even having kids come with different hats, different props. Again, you can do it as they have to come to class with those things. And even if they don't know what you're about to do, bring your favorite, wear your favorite clothes that you wear on Shabbat. Bring something that reminds you of school. Whatever it is, bring something that shows what the weather is or what you did this weekend. Things like that. Those are all things that when they can share with each other, and they can share with each other without everybody talking, right? I can just look at them and see, you're wearing a fireman's hat. You brought your favorite Kiddush cup. Whatever it is, makes that much more interactive and makes kids, they want to know. They want to know what other people are bringing. They want to know what you're bringing. So even sometimes seeing different things in your house, if you're comfortable with that. Here's where I bake my challah. Here's where I, look out the window and see something. Here's my backyard. Things like that. Also, very interactive, engages students, that they're not just, ho-hum. A couple of other ideas. An idea that my nephew, who is a 5-year-old, loves is freeze dance. Freeze dance is hilarious to watch when only one person is standing there freeze dancing, but kids love it. It's great for movement. It's great for if you want them to get used to a song that's teaching them something. And freeze dance works like freeze dance would work. You play the song, they have to dance, and then you stop it and they have to stop. Rebecca, question.
Well, it's not a question, but I was just wanted to add to what you were saying that, even though we're doing this on Zoom, like even parents get involved. Like we did Zumba for Z Week, and it was rough teaching it, but seeing the parents get up with their kids, they really enjoyed it. And then we also do a Tudita every Tuesday, and the parents started doing it with their kids because that's all the kids would talk about all year. So now the parents get to do it with them.
That's so nice. Another thing that's like that is like a Shabbat party. And you give them a heads up beforehand. On Friday, we'd like you to come to class with a snack and your favorite Kiddush cup, and we're gonna sing songs. And again, when you sing songs on Zoom, I don't know if you've tried it, it's an epic disaster if everybody's sound is on. My family has had multiple birthdays. We just sing out loud, everybody. It is terribly horrible sounding. So the best way to do that is to mute everybody except for you if you're singing, or you can pick one kid each week. You're going to be in charge of singing Shalom Aleichem. You're going to be in charge of whatever it is that you're singing. And each week that can change, just like if you have Shabbat Ima and Abba, that changes as well. So that's another way of being very interactive. Freeze dance happens to be one of my favorites to watch. Other ideas of interactive. And you can see from the interactive that a lot of it is just making sure that people can see things on screen and that they can be part of that interaction. Another way, if you're learning letters, you can hold up a letter. Let's say I'm holding up A. Raise your hand if A is in your name. Okay. You can do that with numbers. I'm holding up a number, pick up that number object. Clearly don't say like 15 because that's going to get complicated. But things like that where everyone again can see everybody else. If you can get supplies to your students. So if there are, like if you can make flashcards of some sort, or even tell everybody to take index cards and write the alphabet on it, or if they're learning how to read, a list of words that they should have on that, and then you can hold up a picture of that word, and then the students hold up the word card, and you can see which students did which, and if everybody was on board. If you teach Hebrew, one thing that someone was telling me they have seen their preschool teachers do is give instructions of movement in Hebrew. They were doing this with 2 teachers in one class. So one teacher would say something like lakum, and the other teacher would stand up, and all the students would have to stand up. I think you could do it with one teacher who just says what to do. And if everyone stares at you blankly, you know they don't know what to do, and you can just tell them, or hint at it, however you would want them to figure out what you're trying to get at. So that's a way to work with language with Hebrew. Again, if you have other word lists and you have cards, you can have them, like you can show a picture and they need to say the opposite, or hold up a card that says the opposite. All of those things need a little bit of prep, but also are very doable. You can also decide that you have to hold up 2, if you can't get things to people, you hold up 2 cards and they have to tell you by thumbs up or thumbs down if those 2 are opposites. Are they opposites? Are they not opposites? And so that's another way to work if you can't get supplies to your students, or you can and they'll never show up on the Zoom. So that's a few interactive ideas. I have more, but I just want to pause and see if anyone else has things they want to contribute or questions about my running through these ideas. Unmute yourself and just talk if you have a question or a comment.
I kept my Wednesday yoga that I did with them in school. Mm-hmm. So every Wednesday we have Hebrew yoga activity, which I invite the parents and siblings to join in, as long as the younger siblings are not taking the show of and the attention of our preschoolers, so they can be a part of it. So that's the rule that I gave them in advance when I sent them the information. And it's nice to see some parents do join, and some parents kind of enjoying that their kids are busy while they can do other things while they are involved with me. Right. So, and I do give them the instruction in advance when they have to do like hunting for like different colors and for animals. We were talking about the safari, so they have to prepare in advance with animals that they had, and then we talked about if you have it, you don't have it, and I do teach language, so it's like a right. I have, I don't have, so it was kind of a nice way to do it. But
yeah. I mean, I think the key is fairly obvious, that you want to be doing things that get the students to want to be there and to be engaged. And the challenge is that it's not in person, so it's much harder to do that. I think like initially people thought, okay, so we'll have story time, which is great, except you could lose people because it might, first of all, if I'm holding a book, this is a lot less interesting from here if I'm holding a book and reading it to you. So that's one challenge. But the truth is, there's a workaround for that challenge. And the workaround is there are a bazillion online places that you can get books for free. And then you can share your screen. And as you read the book and share your screen, your students are essentially right next to you, reading the book along with you. So that's the workaround for story time. A show and share. Thank you. That was another idea I was actually going to talk about. And that's similar to coming in costume, except for here you can really do it either very theme or topic oriented. Let's say you're talking about Shavuot. So you ask 3 students, or throughout the week, every day, 2 students share something that they like about Shavuot, something they're going to do on Shavuot, something they learned about Shavuot, whatever it is. And every day, maybe at introduction part, when you're talking about the weather and what day it is, they get to show and or share an answer to that. It can also not be relevant to that and can just be if they have a pet. Would you like to show us and share your pet? The advantage to all of this is that on some level you get to learn about, the kids get to learn about each other, and the teacher gets to learn about the children, what home is like and what things are at home that you wouldn't necessarily get to know otherwise. So that's another piece of it. Another thing that someone suggested was to bring in a guest speaker. So the person I was talking to said their brother-in-law, I think, is a vet. And so he came to the preschool and brought his dog and spoke about what it's like to be a vet, showed them things about their dog, about his dog, and could answer questions that the kids had about being a vet. I wonder, when I heard this, I wonder if you could like call your local fire department and ask them if they would be willing to have a firefighter join your Zoom, or a Hatzalah driver, or somebody like that, who is also very interesting and might not be somebody that they normally get to interact with, and just hear a little bit about what they do. And if they're in their firehouse or ambulance or whatever it is, to kind of show the kids around. I know that lots of times preschools take trips to fire stations. This clearly is not an option right now, but maybe this is a kind of workaround. So, or if you have parents who have interesting jobs and want to do something like that, that's also an option. Another interactive, but this depends on if there are parents there to help children, is cooking and cooking demonstrations. One school I know did how to make Israeli salad for Yom HaAtzmaut, but you can also do, you know, how to make a cookie, or how to bake challah, or something even more simple like how to put a sandwich together. But those things for preschool are super exciting and fun and workable as long as we're using normal ingredients that people have, and parents can be there to help out. Some other options. Okay. Another thing that somebody was telling, another suggestion that someone had was to have 2 mismatched socks next to your computer, and you put them on your hands. I actually meant to bring 2 unmatched socks and totally forgot. And you put them on your hands like puppets, and you ask your students to also bring a sock, and they do that also. And that's how you can answer questions, talk for a little bit, just make it a little bit more exciting. And then either before class or after class, have them decorate said sock as a sock puppet. So that's another interesting way to get kids involved. I think that would actually look hilarious on a screen like this. But that's another way of kind of like shaking things up. In terms of things like math, you know, somebody had kids bring a bunch of socks to class, and then the kids counted the socks by ones and then put them in pairs and counted by twos. And so that was one activity that, and they could all show their socks and what socks they have, and would they pair them matching, not matching? What does that mean? So things like that. Also art projects. I think we might have mentioned this before. Art projects, so that like, you know, the paint parties that people have, like you're going to be Van Gogh all of a sudden because you're going to follow somebody's instructions on how to do that. So a similar idea. You tell students or parents what supplies you need, and then you can do the art project step by step so that the kids can follow along. So if it's, if it was like for Pesach time, if you wanted to make a Kiddush cup, so you would have them have a plastic Kiddush cup. Some places I know, some schools I know have dropped supplies off at people's houses. Some places have had supplies in kits in front of a teacher's door that people can just come and pick up. And some people have just asked parents to get the supplies they need. And then the teacher shows step by step the students how to do it. And also I would advise have it written out and sent to parents so that if a kid gets confused, someone can help them. Also painting together while the teacher paints, the student paints. On Zoom, there's a whiteboard. So if you wanted, you could put up the whiteboard and draw, and they could be drawing in front of them. You can also, right, Rebecca, good idea. Use a Connect 4 board and the pieces with zoo animal figures, and you graph your favorite zoo animals, and clearly a Connect 4 board would show you what that looks like. If your students are computer comfortable, which I feel like maybe not, on Zoom, there are things you can use, like the whiteboard. You can also use something called annotating that Zoom has. Is anyone familiar with annotating by a show of hands? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, great. So annotation is an option you have on Zoom where, let's say I pull up a picture of, I share my screen and I pull up a picture. Let's see if we can do it right now, actually, so I can show you what it looks like. Here we go. Let's say, okay. So I am just going to share my screen. Second, share my screen, and then let's see if you can do this. Okay. Share screen. Okay, so here you see elephants. And on the bottom of your screen should be an option that says annotate. And what I want you to do is use the stamp. That's one option there. And just stamp something on the picture or around the picture. So like that. Now, I think that personally, I think unless you have like really computer comfortable people, this could be more challenging for people to do. But it is a way to have students also be part of it if they are computer savvy, right? You can circle things, you can pick a color. Everyone put a heart that's blue. So they go to format and pick blue, and then the stamp and pick the heart. And now you can have a blue heart in theory. In practice, that didn't really work for me. Or you can circle things in colors. I think that this particular activity is really for the more advanced computer people of the world. I think it also might depend what kind of account you have on Zoom. But for the most part, it's generally there. Annotate. I prefer the whiteboard.
But all this does,
Yeah.
excuse me, but this is not really referred to preschool. That means parents have to be right next to them. It's really not.
So the truth is, it depends. Like there are kindergartners, right, 5-year-olds who could do it. On a whole, I would agree with you. Not the best, unless a parent is next to them. Most preschoolers could not do that. Which is why I like the whiteboard better. The whiteboard, for those who are not familiar, is also a really great tool. And that's great if you want, like, you ask a kid to draw a picture for you. Everyone, draw whatever you want on this whiteboard, and everyone can do that. And especially if they're using things like, where they're using things like iPads so that it's a touch screen, much easier to draw. Those are things that can work. If you don't have a pencil on the whiteboard, you don't have a pencil, Aileen?
Yes, somebody wrote in that there's a pencil on the bottom that you can write on, but I don't see any way to make an annotation or any kind of stamp.
Does it say, were there like 3 dots? Sometimes it hides in an extra menu.
In the 3 dots, it had for the chat box, like a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Right, yes, that also, but yes, so you couldn't find it. Okay. It normally is there, but sometimes I find that it moves around and I have to find where it is. But it should be there. Again, annotate, not really the most ideal for preschool. Whiteboard, that should be easier because then you just need, especially if you're touch screening it, a finger. I hope that is helpful. Okay, whose hand is up? Unmute yourself if you want to say something. I see over here. Helene. Okay, anyone have any other questions? Questions or comments? Okay, great. Okay, so that's just things in Zoom that you could use. I think there's lots of things that you don't need to rely on that technology in any real way. There's lots of other ways to use this. A couple of other ideas before we move on to not on Zoom. Okay, we said sing songs, experiment, we mentioned in the beginning, showing experiments. Also, I had another idea someone had is forming shapes using either chopsticks or silverware or blocks or things like that. So you can have them, if they're learning about shapes, figure out how to do that. Or another thing someone told me is that in their school, they were going over how to form letters. And we're doing that with sticks, like popsicle sticks, to show how letters are formed. You can do writing, like how you make any kind of letter, and then kids can write that on a page and hold it up so that you can see that they've made it correctly. The only caveat I will say about that is the default of Zoom is to be mirror image. So you either can assume they're mirror image, so their B is really backwards because they're mirror imaged, or you can tell parents to make sure to click mirror image so it flips back, so you see what they see. So that's another thing. Yes, writing in salt or sugar is also great, Stephanie, and that's a great thing to do. Lots of things that you would normally do in your classrooms, to some extent, can be done. It's just going to look different, and also probably done on a smaller scale. So those are important things to think about. Okay, just okay. I think that's good. Anyone have any other questions or comments about when you're using Zoom? Okay, great. So let's talk about when they're not on Zoom. And for this, we're going back to share screen. Sec. Okay. Share screen and I sometimes don't get along. Okay. So we talked about interactivity, talked about matching games, scavenger hunt, freeze dance, sharing, show and tell, stories, objects in your house, costumes. Okay, now offline. Offline is a little more challenging because I think that teachers feel the pressure of really wanting to make sure that their students are doing things, and parents feel the pressure of wanting their children to be doing things. Especially preschool students. I have a sister with 3 very young children, and when they're occupied and doing something worthwhile, she is happiest. So the one thing that's very important, I think a great option, is to send choice boards to parents. Choice boards, I'm sure all of you are familiar with. This happens to be a blank choice board, but putting things in either activities by category, so reading activities, Hebrew activities, holiday activities, number activities, color activities, however you want to structure it, and then lay them out. I would say one of the best ways to do it is lay it out with 5 boxes for each day of the week, and they have to pick 3 things from, let's say you have 4 columns, 3 things every day to do. One from any of the columns, but not like 4 reading ones in one day or something like that. Clearly, you have no control over whether they do 4 reading ones or not in one day. But this gives parents a sense of here are the things we want to cover. Here are ways we can cover it. And a lot of what we talked about in the Zoom classes is what you can put on said choice boards. So projects. Here's a project we want you to do. And actually, when we meet again, your kids are going to show their projects. They should have it in front of them. And then as long as they have the supplies for the project, the instructions for the project, that's great. If it's a project that a kid can do more or less on their own with just a little bit of help, that's even better. Shape hunts or any kind of hunt, right? Someone mentioned they did animal hunts, shape hunts, give them a list of words and you want them to find that, and either have them take pictures of that, or they can draw that, or they can just check off a list that they saw it, or draw a picture of it. All those kind of hunts are amazing. It's getting to be nicer weather, so for lots of kids, going outside to some extent is an option. So if that can figure into it, that's also great. Also assigning reading. Again, there are a bazillion books online if that's a problem, if like people not having books is a problem. And I know that one of the things that people are enjoying, and again, this depends on if they're comfortable with things like FaceTime and Zoom and that kind of thing, is reading to grandparents or other family members that are not living with them right now. So that's an option. My 6-year-old niece reads her Hebrew to me every 2 days. And that's made it more fun for her and a pleasure for me. So doing things like that, especially if there are people in the family who are home alone and have been for the last 7-8 weeks, this is a good way to connect with them. So readings, or even recognizing letters for little kids, those kinds of things. Songs. Songs are great because you can either send a recording of the song and then they can listen to the recording of the song, or teach it during one class and then have them as an activity have to sing the song with, again, a family member either in the house or a family member who they can call and sing to. So those are also good. Movement things are always good, good options. Let's see, what else? Anyone have any questions or comments for this yet? Yes, counting things. I don't know if you're familiar with I think it's a Dr. Seuss book, My Book About Me. My Book About Me, as a kid, I loved this book. It's a book that you fill in on your own. And it asks some regular things like what color are your eyes, and you color in what color your eyes are, and what color is your hair and things like that. But then it also has count the windows in your house and write down the number. How many steps are in your house, if any? Count how many pairs of socks you have. All of those things are great for numbers. You can also say, how many blue shirts do you have? So that they can do numbers and colors. And coming up with a list of things that they need to look around their house for is both fun for them and also a learning experience. They have to count or draw a picture of your room, or any of those kinds of things that gets them to kind of reflect on their space and what they're doing is also very helpful. I know personally for me, My Book About Me that I have, I love looking at it. Clearly, I did it many, many years ago. Fun anecdote, my mother let my younger sister cross out all of my answers and put her answers in instead. Needless to say, that made me very unhappy, but my sister liked it just the same. So all of a sudden I had brown eyes, and then she crossed it out and colored it in blue because she has blue eyes. But that idea of reflecting on your space and using the space around the students to help them learn is essentially the best way for them to be doing things at home and not on Zoom. So really almost anything is good for them to do. I think in this My Book About Me, it even had like how many forks are in your house, which could make a mother or father crazy that their child is counting how many forks they have, or a great project. Sorting games are great, right? If you have almost everybody has some kind of block, magnet tile, Lego-y thing. So ask them to sort them by color, sort them by size, sort them by shape. So that's another thing. Building anything with those blocks, Legos, Magnetile, Connexy kind of things, Duplo blocks, those are all like, and if someone can take a picture of that and send it to you, even better, because then at your next Zoom class, you can show everybody all the pictures that you got of their the houses they built, what shul they built, whatever it is that you asked them to build. So all of those things that kids have at home are resources that you should be thinking about to use, that doesn't have parents have to go get something, and also has kind of kids focus on it. In the very beginning of all of this shutdown, there was a huge list of Lego challenges that people were doing, like build a Ferris wheel or build this. But you can do the same kind of thing of every week have something else they need to build that has to do with whatever your theme is. So even if it's something like clouds that you were talking about before, maybe have them put together blocks that they think might look like a cloud, which is challenging given that that most blocks are square and clouds are not. But something like that, or what it would look like, what you would want a cloud to look like if it could be any shape, any building. I'm literally just trying to think in my head right now, so I apologize for the not great suggestions. But that idea of using what they have in front of them, or harnessing like kids like Lego and Duplo. So let's work with that, or Little People, or whatever it is that you know your students like. Harness those things for what you want them to learn, right? Set a Shabbat table, which would be another thing that I think would be a nice idea outside, is the idea of like either having a mitzvah a day, a mitzvah a week that they have to make sure to do, and it be a mitzvah that's not only about them, right? So on their choice board, a few options could be, help out with dinner, help out cleaning your room before somebody asks you, help out with a little sibling, help, whatever it is, some kind of good deed, mitzvah-y thing that they can do that is not only about them, and also kind of connects them to, we're here to help other people as well. Write a letter to your mailman thanking them for the mail. Or write a letter to a friend who you haven't seen in a while and mail it, or draw a picture for a friend and ask your parents to mail it or drop it off. So things like that are also great things that they can put on their choice board, and that you can put on the choice board and they can decide to do or not do. I think one of the things that's important about a choice board is to put more choices than they need, and to kind of be okay with the fact that they aren't going to do all of them. And for some kids, they need programming all the time. And for some kids, and that's part of the struggle I think teachers are having, some kids, the parents are like, no, too much, there's too much. Again, I have a bunch of siblings with a bunch of kids, and it's funny to hear their different expectations. I have one sister-in-law who wants her preschool children to have things all the time, like almost the entire day. And then I have another sibling who's like, listen, like there's a lot, and my kid, it's overload. I can't be on top of them the whole time like this. And so the choice board kind of addresses that need. So the sister-in-law who wants programming all the time can do every single square in that choice board if she really wants. And the one who can't, won't, and that's okay. So I think that's also part of like the culture of getting used to hopefully not for long, this distance learning. And for preschool, especially when it's almost always about play, this is challenging because it's play with peers, and now most of them are not playing with peers or have that opportunity. So that's a little bit of a challenge. I would also think that another good idea might be to have kids, like we were saying, share, maybe think about a song they want to share that they can play for everybody or sing for everybody. Because I think music is very helpful in this atmosphere. So that's another way of doing it. There are about 4 billion ideas online. You can just get completely overwhelmed by them, but also there are a lot of resources. So if you are somebody who is used to looking around online, there are lots of places you can go and ask questions. If you're on Facebook, there are Facebook groups about distance learning now in this time, and they're often sorted by age. I can definitely give you that information as we get closer to the end of this. I'm trying to, let me just check and make sure I've covered most of what I want to cover. I think I have. One other thing, if you, and I kind of mentioned this, if you do tefillah, and you usually pick like a chazan or chazanit, so I have seen places that are still doing that, and they pick like the one chazan for the day, and everyone else is muted, and that chazan gets to do the normal, whatever they're used to in school routine, and love it. Because kids also love being on a screen and seeing themselves. It's like being on TV. It's amazing. And again, it's still part of the routine and has them practicing what we want them to practice and what we want them to be used to. So that's another thing that you can do. We have about 12 more minutes. So instead of me talking more, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions or challenges that they're thinking about that they think like we just did not cover or anything like that. So I'm going to open the floor up to any questions or comments that people have. Yeah, unmute yourself if you have a.
Hi, I have a question about the book sharing on the screen. I don't.
Okay, here's what you would do.
Quickly, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there are a bunch of different apps or websites that have you able to download ebooks. And so you would download an ebook, and then you would go to share, you'd open it. You go to share screen. You'd click on share screen, gives you an option of what screen you want to share. You would pick the one that's the book. And then you would read that book like you would normally read an ebook. But the students are seeing exactly what you're doing. So when you turn the page, they'll see you turn they'll see the page turn. And so it's really like they're right in front of you reading the book along.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Michelle.
So I know there's a couple other directors on, but I'd love to hear what other teachers think. I'm the director of a preschool. I think we're getting to a point where I don't know, this is getting old. We've been doing it a long time, and this is probably not the end. Even when school potentially ends in June, is the fear of how do we continue the enthusiasm? How do we change up the activities? How do we continue to engage our families beyond potentially June? I guess I don't know if this is the right venue for it, but it's a big challenge, I know, for us.
Does anyone have any suggestions or comments?
Well, I think to piggyback along with what Michelle said, not just how do we keep it going and keeping it exciting, but in the fall, if we come back and if it happens again, or it happens before we can reopen, or whatever the circumstances may be, that's a traditional time where you get new children. So, now you're talking about transitioning a new group of children in, whereas some of us have summer programs where the kids could possibly transition, some of us don't, or some don't attend. So along with Michelle's question, I would love to know ways to then introduce new children to new group of teachers.
So I'm just going to address that a little bit. I think that there are ways that you can essentially icebreakery kind of things, almost the same way as we were talking before of sharing something. So like before school, this also depends on where you are, right? If you're in a school where all of your students live in the same area, so even, going to their houses and standing outside their door or their window to introduce yourself is helpful, so that at least you're a familiar face, or a welcome letter or things like that are essentially in the very beginning very helpful. And I think also asking kids, all of them, to bring, like, before the first class, everyone bring your favorite toy, and then you can share your favorite toy. Susan, did you want to add something?
And I think sometimes, though, we get sick of seeing ourselves or hearing ourselves, but they're not necessarily as sick of it as maybe we think we are. We have a child who we would think would be, and we did an activity with him one week and had something new for the next week. And the first thing he said when he came on is, "Are we going to play the What's Missing game again?" So where we get sick of maybe hearing ourselves, maybe they still are more engaged than we give ourselves credit for. When we hear stuff like that, it's like, okay, that was a successful activity, and maybe I can do that again and not have to find a new one or change the things you do it with. But if it works, stay on the same lines. Just a thought.
I don't worry as much about the kids. I think that we do engage the kids. I think they're happy to see our faces. I think the parents are going to get to a point where, now what? This doesn't allow me to work. And I know we all have to think differently. I'm not being unrealistic, but I think there is a point. I'm not worried about the kids. I guess it's beyond that. So I think the activities are great.
So I think one of the things that helps with parents is communicating a lot, almost in a way that might seem overwhelming, but like giving them as much information and as much of, here's what we're doing and here's our plan and here's what we want you to be involved in. And, if you have any suggestions, we want to hear your suggestions, and like almost that transparency, but like with exclamation points of like, we are communicating with you the whole time and we want you to know, here's our plan, here's what we're thinking, here's what we want to, what we think your kids are going to learn, here's what our goals are. I think that's helpful with them. And you're right, like there will come a time when they're like, this can't possibly be the realistic answer to anything. But I'm not sure it's fair to expect you to have the answer to that, except to say, nobody thinks this is the ideal way of going. And it's not like this is the now for the rest of our lives how we're teaching. To a certain extent, there's a patience that goes along with it that I know is easy for me to say as not a preschool director, but also a reality. But I do think the communication piece of it is huge, and kind of keeping those lines of communication open are also very, very important. Anyone else want to comment on that or have anything to say? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Was this helpful? Are there things I didn't address that you want addressed? Anyone? Anything that you thought, oh, it would be great if we really talked about this and we totally didn't get there? Okay, great. One of the final thought I'll just say is this. Preschool is, as you all know, hugely important, but also amazing because your students are happy to see you and happy to do all these activities, and they like doing it, and they're not jaded yet, and that's great. Can you tell that I often teach high school and adults? And that's very important to just keep in perspective that everything you're doing, they're gonna like, and it'll be good. And some kids will show their enthusiasm and some kids will not, but ultimately it's great everything that you're doing, and that you're thinking about how to make this interactive, what can we do to make this the best for our students, is like 17 steps ahead of where lots of other people are. So you should just keep that in mind. I'm sure this is not easy and can be overwhelming also because you have other parts of your life. But you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be, and that's great. And you should try to keep that in mind. Last thing I'm just going to ask you to do is there is a survey that CJE wants you to fill out about this class. I'm going to put it in the chat because it's a link. I'm going to put it in the chat, and if you can, please just fill that out. If anyone else has any questions or comments or wants anything, if anyone wants the information about the Facebook group I was talking about, you can raise your hands and I will find it for you. Anyone want to know about that? Okay, so the Facebook group is called, it's called, I say this like I have it right here in front of me, but I do not. 1 second. It was like global. I was just looking at it because it gets super overwhelming and also really nice. This is one of the things that when all of this started gave me a lot of strength, which was this group started almost immediately when people started teaching from distance and weren't used to it. It's called the Global Educator Collective. It's from people all over the world. I'll actually share my screen for a second so you can see what it is. And you can I would suggest, if you're going to use it, to first search for what you're looking for. Like, for example, I searched preschool activities. And like 4 billion things, and they have a separate preschool section. And it's people from all over. And what inspired me about this group is that how willing people were to share their materials. There were people in the beginning who said, you know, I'm teaching 7th and 8th grade history. How do I do this online? And someone else was like, well, I've been doing this distance learning, distance teaching for years. I'm uploading all of my materials so you can use it. So it's a really cooperative group of people. It's amazing. And there's 128,000 members. And they're from all over the world, all English speaking. So the Global Educator Collective, I highly recommend that. It's very, very helpful. Otherwise, there's a billion resources out there. And that's one of the benefits, I guess, of this happening now and not 25 years ago, is that those resources are out there. So good luck with everything. It was nice meeting you briefly, and good luck with the rest of your year, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.